Welcome back to the DK Custom Products video channel. My name's Kevin, this is Dwayne, and today we're going to talk about never talked about secrets in the industry and sleeper performance mods and how they're related to each other.
Yeah.
Before we get into the meat of this video, we have this entire report on our website. We'll put the link below, and we'll also put the link to not a video but to the actual report up in the corner here, where all the things that we talk about plus some stuff that we're not going to be able to cover in this video are in that written report that you can refer to. So Dwayne, we did a report about 10 years ago, and we titled the report Never Talked About Secrets.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about them for the last 10 years, so they're not never talked about. And there's a few other people who've been, realizing, hey, this is important, but still they're very, very rarely talked about.
Right.
And then there's some mods that we do based on those rarely talked about industry secrets.
True.
And so why don't you run us through?
Yeah, so it's more glamorous or more fun just to bolt on an air cleaner or throw this exhaust on there, or put these, whatever on there. More conventional performance mods. What you think of is, hey, I need a cold air intake, So doing that, and that can drastically change the look of the bike. So that kind of excites you more. Mm-hmm. But, that kind of leaves room to overlook other small modifications that can get you a big result. Or can, say you upgrade an air cleaner. Yeah, it might look cool, might be a trick looking air cleaner, but you're leaving performance on the table with the design of that particular air cleaner because, say, it's venting hot air into the intake, compromising performance. So yeah, that's one step forward, but then it's also a step backwards. And so what we're going to talk about today is the small mods you can do, or small improvements you can do, that's just a blanket improvement to performance and longevity overall.
And it's sort of like the series that we've done quite a few videos on. Little changes can make a big difference.
That's right.
So, and before you get into those little things that make a difference, that aren't so glamorous, like an air cleaner or exhaust or whatever, let's talk about the rarely talked about secrets that people just either are not aware of. I don't know.
It's more of the why and how.
Yeah,
I think.
Why and how the little mods that you're going to talk about make a difference. And the first thing is that different parts of the engine have different ideal temperatures. Yeah. So yes, when we talk about temperature, we measure oil temperature and we measure engine temperature, but that's what we measure because that's what we can measure. But there's an ideal temperature for the cam, there's an ideal temperature for the sump, there's an ideal temperature for the cylinder heads, there's a different ideal temperature for the actual cylinder walls.
Right, and then that depends on what model bike you have.
Right, yeah. Different parts of the engine should be ideally at different temperatures, and that's not been talked about near as much. The other is cold air intake. Now in the automotive world, people talk about cold air intake all the time. You rarely hear people with Harleys talking about cold air intake. You hear them talking about, oh, I got this that really pushes a lot of air. I got this that really lets a lot of air flow. They talk about how the air cleaner looks or how much filter element area it has.
Or they love to spout off about a CFM.
Yeah, but the most important thing about an air cleaner is that the air going through the air cleaner and into the intake is as cold as possible. And that's why people who race actually have ice reservoirs that they run the air through ice to cool that air down. So cold air intake is really important. And then the other thing, and I'm going to read this to you exactly because this is not stuff we made up, by the way. This is a result of a lot of research that we did and saw what the consensus is in the people who build engines for performance and reliability.
Right, so these are universal rules for combustion engines.
So the cylinder walls should not heat up the air before compression, but also not cool down the gas at combustion. So those are like two opposing things, right? So the compromise temperature at the cylinder walls for best performance is 190 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the best compromise between the two things that are really important. And then, of course, the last thing is, I think more people know about this, but maybe not. The hotter the exhaust is, the faster it will evacuate and the better fresh charge you'll get, the more reliable it will be. But you don't want that heat coming from reversion or restriction. So those are the four things that are very, very rarely talked about. And so then when we move on to what Dwayne's going to share on the little mods that help achieve those four things, he's not going to talk about air cleaners, he's not going to talk about exhaust, he's not going to talk about tune, because those aren't rarely talked about.
No.
And those are things that, as you said, they're going to, if they're done right, they're going to increase performance. What are the things that we can do that will help us set the bike up to be in the optimum levels for these rarely talked about things?
Right. So like the first thing you talked about was the intake air temperature needing to be cooler, right? So one may hear that and say, well, what the hell am I going to do about that? I can't help the temperature outside. I can't help the design of this air cleaner. Well, if you look into the benefits of an external breather system, the crankcase ventilation, how it vents into the intake, you'll see that you're not doing yourself any favors by feeding that hot gases that exceed 100 degrees, by the way. So regardless of what the ambient temperatures are outside, you're compromising that with over 100 degree Fahrenheit gases feeding into the air box. And so vent that externally. That's an easy solution. Vent it externally. Regardless of the air cleaner you have, most air cleaners can be vented externally, or you can get one like the ones we make that are just designed to vent externally. So now you're not compromising performance. You're not just settling for what that air cleaner has to offer you. And then, of course, keeping the engine cylinders cool, keeping the engine temperature overall cooler. You can do things like lifting the tank. More air to your air-cooled engine will keep it cooler. I don't think that's up for debate. So doing things like lifting the tank, getting that up off the engine, not, in the original form, that tank sits down on top of those heads, traps that heat, not allowing it to dissipate. Then you can supplement that. You can get even more air to your air-cooled engine with things like cooling deflector wings. Air deflector wings that mount up front, capture the headwinds, and send them right to the engine cylinders, where your engine is starving for air. I mean, it's an air-cooled engine. Get as much air as possible to it. And back to different parts of the engine having different ideal temperatures. For example, the sump, the oil that's going through that sump. If that oil is hot, that area of the engine will be hot. It's just a no-brainer. And so you would say, well, obviously you can add an oil cooler. Like, that's the first thing you think of. Well, people often overlook, what about what difference would an oil filter make? You know what I mean? Like, people are like, well, there's nothing I can do about the temperature in the oil filter, but there actually is. Use an oil filter that has a billet aluminum housing that allows that heat to dissipate. If you're using these paper filters that are all clogged up and, just have the tin or whatever housing around them, you're not doing yourself any favors.
And the other thing about the permanent oil filters is that they put less strain on the engine, which means the engine doesn't have to work as hard.
Right.
So it's not going to be as hot.
Right. So it's, not all parts are created equal. Not all air cleaners are created equal. Not all exhaust systems, and talking about the exhaust, you want that exhaust temperature hot so it evacuates quickly, but you don't want to increase that temperature with things like reversion or restriction or back pressure. So, you might say, well, what can I do about that? I didn't design these Vance and Hines short shots. That's what came on the bike. Well, you can always make that exhaust system just a little more free-flowing. So remove those baffles. Now it's free-flowing, but you still have to address the reversion issue. So just a small exhaust insert, like the Thunder Torque insert, will prevent that reversion while increasing the exhaust gas velocity and virtually not changing the engine exhaust temperature, by any measurable amount. Well, and then the next thing would be, well, I've done all those things. It's an air-cooled engine. I've done the tank lift. I've done the tank lift. I've added cooling deflector wings. I've gotten more air to it. Still needs a little more help. Like I can't. What more could I possibly do? You know, I can't help the headwinds. Well, you can artificially get more air to it by use of an electric fan. Now that's a more pricey measure to take, and in my opinion, it should be sort of at the end of your list. You know, because you know, cooling deflector wings and tank lift easily 30 degrees lower engine temperature. An electric fan also 30 plus degrees lower engine temperature. One of those combinations less than $150 for both. The other over $500 for electric fans. So while I'm not saying don't get an electric fan, just put it at the end of your list. And that's just one of many small things you can do that again are often overlooked because you know we love to upgrade the air cleaner. We love to upgrade the exhaust, but we never put too much thought into how those upgrades are going to affect the bike and how well they're going to work. You know, a lot of times, you know, there's no difference between an Arlen-S Big Sucker and a Screaming Eagle Stage 1. Those basic Stage 1s we've seen for years, there's no difference in those. And a lot of times people think, well, that's what I'm stuck with. But you're not. I mean, you can always improve those. You can always get a better air cleaner than those. So there's always, you know, room to do a little more research and not just settle for what you have. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard the term sleeper mods. You know, a lot of times a sleeper mod is something you don't even notice. So yeah, you might see this guy's bike that has these hoses running from the heads and running back here to a catch can. I would call that a sleeper mod because if you are not informed on the benefits of an external breather system, you would just brush that off to the side. Oh, it's not doing nothing for this guy. Little do they know that guy's feeding air into his intake that is literally 20 to 30 degrees lower than what this guy is feeding into his intake, venting internally.
So this video that's based on the report that we've had out for over 10 years that's entitled Long Ignored, Little Known Performance Mods, aka sleeper mods, is all based on information that is not discussed very much. Different parts of the engine are ideally at different temperatures. Got to have a cold air intake. You want the cylinder walls not to be over 190 degrees.
Yeah.
Ideally. And if they are, you're just not going to get the best power and reliability out of the bike. And of course, the exhaust being as hot as possible.
Yeah, right. And all of these things we just mentioned supplement those other mainstream mods. You know, you can throw, you know, a couple $1,000s in having your cam upgraded and not get the full benefit of that because you're running an air cleaner that vents internally, or your bike's running too hot, or it's starving for air. You know, there's little things you can do that supplement the big things. So,
and this is not a little known secret or but I think it is ignored, and I think it's not talked about enough, is you'll talk to one guy who's spent $5,000 on a Stage 2.
Yeah.
He went from stock, did Stage 1 and Stage 2, he spent $5,000 on it. And then you have another guy who's also done a Stage 2, and let's say he spent $5,000, and another guy who's also done it, maybe he only spent $3,000, but it's still a Stage 2. Let's say they all have the same exact year and model bike, and they all get different results, sometimes radically different results. And it's because of how everything is working together and whether or not they're addressing what the core things are that are important for for performance and reliability. So we hope this video has helped you out. Please give us a thumbs up if you liked it. Please share it with your friends. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please consider doing so. It helps us out a lot. And you can hit that notification bell so you know when the next video comes out.
That's right. Now, if you have any questions at all about any of these mods we mentioned or anything we offer on our website, leave us a comment below or shoot me an email to support@dkcustomproducts.com, or don't hesitate to give us a call if you wish, 662-252-8828. We have an entire customer service team ready to help you out.
Y'all ride safe out there.